Warning, do not watch this alone. In Ireland, there are hills you are never supposed to disturb. Not because of superstition, but because people who did never returned to normal. Some never returned at all. What you are about to hear is not a fairy tale. It is a warning passed quietly between families for centuries. Some reports were sealed, some names were erased, and some debts are still unpaid. The stories say there are places in the world that should never be touched. Ancient places, hallowed ground, places where the line between our world and another is thin. Tonight, we're not talking about haunted houses or forgotten graveyards. We're talking about something older, something buried in the soil of Ireland. We're talking about the Fairy Hills, across the Irish countryside, scattered between farms, roads, and quiet fields, are low earthen mounds. They look harmless, ancient, forgotten, but locals know them by another name: Fairy Hills, surmounds, entrances. Long before Christianity reached Ireland, these hills were believed to belong to the fair folk, and if you're picturing friendly creatures with wands and glitter, think again. The beings of Irish lore are not playful spirits. They are an older race, ancient, territorial, bound by rules older than human law. Folklore says these beings, the AOSC, retreated underground when humans claimed the land. The hills became their fortresses, their palaces. They became borders, boundaries never to be crossed. For centuries, this was an undisputed truth. Farmers refused to plow them. Children were warned not to climb them. Entire villages were built around them, never over them. People knew that to disturb a hill was to invite ruin. It wasn't about disrespecting the dead. It was about waking the living. Even today, you'll find landowners who will abandon valuable tracts of land rather than disturb a single mound. They know the price is too high, because the fair folk don't forget, and they don't forgive. They just wait. The old tales are filled with warnings. In the silence of the past, before a time of machines and concrete, the rules were simple. Leave the mounds alone. Old records, some tucked away in local parish archives, tell of men who mocked this belief. Men who saw only dirt and opportunity. They decided to dig anyway, seeking treasure or simply trying to level the land for a new field. The stories that follow are chillingly similar. Tools snapping for no reason, breaking clean in half. Strong horses, unafraid of storms or predators, suddenly refusing to move, freezing in place as if paralyzed by an unseen force. And then came the afflictions. Sudden, crippling illness that doctors couldn't diagnose. A deep, unshakable madness that twisted minds into knots of paranoia and fear. In some cases, death followed just days later, described in old texts only as a wasting, as if the very life force was being drained from the person, sip by sip. Priests documented strange confessions from their parishioners. People claiming they heard music underground, faint melodies played on pipes that seemed to come from inside the soil itself. They heard bells ringing from the heart of the hills, a ghostly chime with no church in sight. Others whispered of voices calling their names on the wind at night, a sweet, irresistible summons from the darkness. But these accounts were never preached from the pulpit. They were buried, just like the secrets the hills kept. Locals say the fair folk do not strike immediately. That's not their way. They mark you first. A sudden chill, a lost object, a strange dream, a small sign that you have trespassed. And once you're marked, the debt will be collected. It might not be today, it might not be tomorrow, but it will be paid. In the last century, the hum of progress grew louder than the whispers of folklore. Roads needed to be built. Housing developments spread across the landscape. Industrial expansion was the new god, and it demanded sacrifice. Each time a new project slated a fairy mound for demolition, the old warnings resurfaced. Locals protested. They pleaded with engineers and foremen, sharing the same stories their grandparents told them. But in the bright light of modernity, these tales sounded like childish fears. The engineers laughed, the bulldozers revved their engines, and then the accidents began. Heavy machinery, just serviced, and in perfect working order, would malfunction without cause. Hydraulic lines would burst, engines would seize, brakes would fail, vehicles parked on flat ground, with engines off and emergency brakes engaged, would inexplicably start rolling downhill, as if nudged by an invisible hand. Workers began to fall ill. Strong, healthy men would suddenly collapse with unexplained fevers that vanished as quickly as they appeared. Some suffered sudden, violent mental breaks, overcome with terror and nonsensical babbling. Others died under circumstances that were never fully explained. A fall from a short ladder, a minor injury that led to a fatal infection. Tragedies that, on their own, seemed like terrible luck, but taken together, they formed a pattern. Official reports listed equipment failure, heat exhaustion, and human error. Case closed. But the witnesses, the other workers who were there, they told a different story in hushed tones at the pub later. They said the hills vibrated at night, that the ground around the mounds felt strangely warm to the touch, even on a cold day. They swore that something moved beneath the soil after dark. Of all the incidents, there was one case that was never released to the public. It involved a major infrastructure project in the mid-20th century. The specifics are lost, buried under layers of official secrecy, but files requested decades later, under Freedom of Information Acts, were returned almost entirely blacked out, heavily redacted. What little information slipped through the cracks suggests a series of escalating events, far worse than any of the others. But the most telling detail is what happened next. The project was abandoned, literally overnight. Crews packed up their equipment and left, and they never returned. The official reason given was unforeseen geological instability. But the locals know the truth, and a few months later, another crew was quietly brought in. Their job wasn't to build, but to restore. They carefully replaced the earth, resodded the grass, and rebuilt the mound exactly as it had been, as if nothing ever happened. As if they were trying to put something back. The files are sealed. The witnesses are gone. But the hill is still there, silent and undisturbed, holding its secrets in the dark. A quiet monument to a warning that was ignored. If you ever find yourself walking the green fields of Ireland and come across a solitary rounded hill, remember these stories. Don't climb it. Don't dig it. Just walk away. Some doors are not meant to be opened. Thanks for watching. If these stories fascinate you, hit that like button and subscribe for more dives into the world's most enduring mysteries. Stay safe out there. They say these aren't just hills. They're called fairy forts, or mounds, and they are not to be disturbed. For generations, people living near these mounds have reported strange occurrences. It starts subtly, a low humming sound that seems to come from the very earth itself, beginning just as the last light of day fades. Then, things get more personal. Residents wake up to find perfect circular tracks around their homes, like something walked around their house all night. Doors that were securely locked are found wide open in the morning. Pets, especially dogs and horses, will suddenly refuse to go outside, cowering in the corner of a room, their eyes fixed on something unseen in the distance. The voice seems to come from the ground beneath their feet. It's never a shout, always a gentle, almost intimate whisper, and it only happens once per night. The old folklore has a chilling warning about this. It says if you answer, even just to say who's there, you are acknowledging a debt, and the fair folk always collect. The stories get even stranger when children are involved. Children born in families living near these disturbed mounds sometimes speak of visitors no one else can see. They describe tall, slender figures with pale, glowing lights. They say these figures have soft voices, and they make promises. They promise to take the children home, to a place where they'll never be sad again. Parents who hear this know the danger. They know it's not a childhood fantasy. It's a claim being made. It's easy to dismiss these as old superstitions, right? Ghost stories to scare tourists. About a decade ago, a team of seasoned paranormal investigators decided to document the phenomena around one particularly active mound. They were confident they would find a rational explanation. They were wrong. From the moment they stepped onto the hill, their equipment began to fail. Fully charged batteries drained in a matter of seconds. Audio recorders, when they worked at all, were plagued by a strange interference. It wasn't until they reviewed the tapes later that they heard it. Buried deep beneath the sound of the wind, there was a faint, rhythmic chanting in a language no one could identify. The investigators themselves were deeply affected. One man, a hardened skeptic, swore he saw the entire hill breathe, a slow, rhythmic rising and falling of the earth itself. Another team member described an overwhelming feeling of being watched, not from the trees or the darkness, but from deep underground. He said it felt like thousands of eyes were on him. After just one night, they packed up and left. The investigation was cut short. The team never released their footage. When asked why, they gave vague excuses about technical difficulties and inconclusive data. But the locals have their own theory. They say the fair folk follow you home if you stay too long. The after effects on the team were severe. Several members reported suffering from debilitating nightmares for months. Dreams of being lost in endless, twisting tunnels underground. One investigator, a man with over 20 years of experience, abandoned the field of paranormal research entirely and has never spoken about that night publicly. Whatever they saw, whatever they experienced on that hill, it was enough to break them. The local folklore offers an explanation for this kind of terrifying aftermath. It says the fair folk, or the good people, as they're often called, don't operate on human emotions like anger or malice. They operate on a principle of balance. They are beings of an ancient, unyielding natural law. When their homes are trespassed upon, a debt is created, and that debt must be paid. They don't kill out of rage. They simply collect what is owed. The payment can take many forms. It might be a life for a life, but rarely in a direct, violent way. More often, it's a slow, cruel unwinding of a person's world. Some who disturb the mounds fall ill with mysterious sicknesses that doctors can't diagnose. They waste away, a slow decline that mirrors the disturbance they caused. For others, the debt is paid through loss. They lose everything they hold dear, sudden financial ruin that comes from nowhere. Happy families are torn apart by unexplained strife and bitterness. Sometimes, people just disappear. They walk out of their homes one day and are never seen again, leaving no trace, no clues. The hill doesn't care who pays the debt, the trespasser or someone they love. It only cares that the balance is restored. You can see the evidence of this fear etched into the landscape itself. Families whose ancestors were known to have farmed on or near a mound often moved away centuries ago, and their descendants refuse to return. In the villages that remain, the locals are friendly. But if you ask about a certain hill, a shuttered look comes over their faces. They change the subject. Entire communities have an unspoken agreement to never mention certain hills by name, as if speaking the name itself is an invitation. This isn't just a story. It's a living, breathing fear that has shaped communities for generations. Even today, in modern Ireland, the respect for these places endures, though many won't admit the real reason why. You might see a new highway that makes a strange, inefficient curve. The plans were altered. The official reason might be geological instability or an archaeological find. But the workers know the truth. The road was rerouted to avoid a ferry fort. Construction projects near these mounds are notorious for equipment failure, unexplained accidents, and workers quitting without notice. It's cheaper and safer to just build around them. It's not superstition written into law. It's a practical decision made by people who remember the stories. People who have seen what happens when the rules are broken. And so, the hills remain untouched, silent, waiting. Through sun and storm, they stand as they have for thousands of years. The folklore warns that the fair folk have long memories. They never forget a kindness, but more importantly, they never, ever forgive an unpaid debt. They are patient. They can wait a lifetime. They can wait for generations. But eventually, the bill always comes due. So, if you find yourself wandering the beautiful, green Irish countryside, and you see a lone, perfectly formed hill, standing silent in a field, a place that nature seems to have left untouched, take the warning seriously. Do not climb it. Do not take a souvenir. And for your own sake, if you hear a soft voice whisper your name from the ground beneath your feet, do not answer. Thanks for joining us in the shadows. Subscribe to Tales of the Dark, where every story gives you a nightmare.